Our final speaker is Miss Lilianne Fan. She is a prominent member of the Malaysian Advisory Group on Myanmar, where she provides critical insights and recommendations on Myanmar's complex political and humanitarian landscape. Over to you.
I hope you all can hear me. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much. And I'm really honored to be part of this extremely important conversation. I will not repeat what has already been said by our other eminent speakers, all of which I absolutely agree with, and I'm really pleased to see that there's a discussion that's happening across regions and internationally. And I think that it's very important for those of us who are neighbors as well as in the region of Myanmar, and those of us who are in countries which are hosting a large number of Rohingya communities as refugees. It's extremely important that we really do look seriously at the risks that continue to face the Rohingya people. I think that there are so many elements that have to be unpacked when we're trying to think about, trying to stop the mass atrocities of Rohingya, and to try to even get to the point where we can have a conversation about looking at, the root causes of the disenfranchisement of Rohingya, which of course at the very heart is the statelessness of the Rohingya people. But I think at this point, we're so unfortunately, witnessing again mass atrocities taking place, and I think that we need to really prioritize as obviously the international approach, which has already been discussed, but I really think the regional approach is extremely important as well, and that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit as well. There's a few points that I want to discuss before I talk more about ASEAN, which of course Malaysia is, we will be taking up the chairmanship of ASEAN in 2025. So it's very important that we, really start looking more seriously at actual strategies that we can be adopting in terms of addressing the entire Myanmar crisis, but obviously as a priority within that, the situation of the Rohingya. There are distinctions between the overall crisis and the situation of the Rohingya, and I think there are two major ones. One is the statelessness, of course, and secondly also is the genocide. I think these things need to be very, very clearly analyzed and articulated by the regional governments and communities and the wider society and those of us who are trying to assist, because the interventions which are necessary are quite distinct. We of course have to talk about the grave violations of international humanitarian law. We have to talk about the need for humanitarian access, but beyond that, we really need to talk as well about, the other thing, of course, that John said earlier is the need for asylum. That's extremely critical. But alongside that, I think is also really atrocity prevention and, what kind of interventions are necessary to be taken up by the governments in the region for atrocity prevention and genocide prevention. And I think that that's where it's a challenge actually for countries in the region, because we're not really used to talking about it. It tends to be seen as something that comes from the West, although it really isn't something that comes from the West. These are universal principles, as was said earlier by another distinguished speaker. And I think we have to underline that. We have to always keep underlining the fact that human rights are universal. This is not a Western narrative. It is not about promoting, narratives of, foreign agendas. These are actually our values as well. Within ASEAN, for example, we also have a human rights declaration, that was issued many years ago. And in fact, I was reading through it, this week, with all these events, marking the commemoration of the 7 years of the Rohingya genocide. And I realized that actually the ASEAN Declaration of Human Rights is extremely similar to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It has so many points which are absolutely universal. that every person should have an inherent right to life, which shall be protected by law. Nobody should be deprived of life. You know, everyone has a right to personal liberty, security. They shouldn't be subjected to arbitrary detention and shouldn't be subjected to torture. The right to freedom of movement, the right to even to seek asylum. Actually, that's all in the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration. And I'm sure that in the other regional bodies and other fora in which many of our countries are members of, we have these standards, and we need to learn how to actualize them, and to be able to stand up to them, and not keep sort of framing this type of narrative as a Western narrative, because I think this kind of thing is coming up quite a lot, particularly in the geopolitics of today, where we do see atrocities taking place at a massive scale, and genocide actually taking place at a massive scale. And we also see the failure of the multilateral system to prevent that. So I think that in that context, the role of the region, the role of regional institutions, regional organizations, actually is much more important. So just to talk about a few approaches which I think are critical, while we talk about the broader issues of supporting the transition to democracy in Myanmar, that should go hand in hand with efforts to stop atrocities, definitely on the international accountability level, but I think even beyond that, also to really look at what can be done regionally to try to take measures to prevent further atrocities from happening. I think there has to be a real recognition that sometimes, approaches which are focused on promoting democracy or even, preventing conflict, and even I would go as far as saying, even pushing for the adherence to international humanitarian law, it's extremely critical, but it doesn't necessarily result in, preventing atrocities from happening, because atrocities, genocide doesn't require armed conflict to happen. IHL is the law. It's the laws of war. It's basically trying to protect civilians within a situation of armed conflict. Even without the situation of armed conflict, I mean, unfortunately, in Rakhine State now, the armed conflict is completely exacerbating the atrocities against the Rohingya. But I think we need to realize that it's not because there's an armed conflict that's happening. This exclusionary ideology that has marginalized the Rohingya in the most institutionalized ways, from stripping them of citizenship, from denial of everything from freedom of movement, to education. Those institutionalized forms of exclusion have been put in place for decades, even before there was an armed conflict as such in Myanmar. And the mobilization of hatred against the Rohingya has also been something that has been going on for years and years. And as I think it was, Brother Nesan Nguyen who mentioned earlier, it's sort of like adding a new actor to the actors who are responsible now for mobilizing and sort of leading, that hatred. With the armed conflict now, that you basically have more actors, including the Arakan army. So we need to, I think, be very wary. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to see any easy solutions at this. But I do think that what we do need to do is to really try to build more sense of responsibility as a region. And ASEAN is one forum, obviously, with Southeast Asia. India is a dialogue partner of ASEAN, and I think that hopefully for the ASEAN chairmanship, we've definitely been advising the Malaysian government to be engaging the dialogue partners and also other border countries, definitely India, but also of course Bangladesh, countries that are bordering with Myanmar, and are also feeling the impact very directly. And then again, I think this conversation needs to continue. Let's not wait until the 8th commemoration of the genocide. Let's not wait until the 9th commemoration of the genocide to talk again about this issue. I think there has to be a real recognition, and the kinds of measures that should be taken, I think, need to be taken at different levels as well. So every country, for example, in India, you do host Rohingya refugees, and I think that if there's one thing that can be done, it's really for the human rights community, the legal community in India, to also try to really engage, your government and your authorities to have a more humane approach to the Rohingya. We're trying to do that in Malaysia as well. We're also not perfect. We're very, very far from having actual humane treatment. There are many Rohingya here in detention. But if there's a way that we can all be, much more humane in this effort, as the accountability measures take place, as we're trying to work collectively towards prevention of atrocities. If there's anything that we can do to protect Rohingya and also to really try to empower them, because in the end, I think it's going to be Rohingya who have to lead, in the recovery of the community and in the future of the community. So I'm just going to end there, but I really am grateful to have this opportunity to be part of this
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone